In recent years, balance flies have had an incredible impact on me both at the vise and on the water. A gold bead pheasant tail is one of my go-to Stillwater patterns. Although a proven producer in its original form, the pheasant tail is a pattern that also benefits from a balanced makeover. Here are the materials you'll need to create your own section of balanced pheasant tail nymphs. So let's tie a balanced version of one of the most popular nymphs out there today, the pheasant tail. We're going to tie a balanced gold bead pheasant tail. So into the jaws of my Regal, I've got a Daiichi number 16. I use 14s as well. Either the 4647, which is black nickel, or the 4640, which is your standard bronze finish. It's entirely up to you. They're both great hooks. So I'm going to we're going to have a bit of a hot spot to this, so I'm going to use some hot orange tying thread here, MFC 80. I'm just going to cover our hook shank, and then come right back up. And then I'm going to use a sequin pin to mount my bead on. So that's a sequin pin. Just got them in my jaws of my hackle pliers here, along with a few errant fibers, but you can just see very small. You can certainly take a common household pin and cut it to length, but these are gold, so they kind of match the gold bead we're going to use. You can certainly take a marker and darken them to match another color bead you may want to use. So just saves you the cutting of a pin step as well. I've taken my sequin pin and I've slid on a gold 7/64 bead with the wide tapered end facing the end, the head of the sequin pin in this instance, and we're going to lash it onto the hook shank, approximately so you can imagine you can get at least 2 more beads in behind. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you look at this distance from where the 60-degree angle on the hook shank takes place to the back of the bead when it's fully pushed up against there, you could envision 2 more beads in there. That's a general sort of good proportion. You could do a test balance as well, but over time and experience, it's taught me that that's usually a pretty good point. And again, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfectly balanced. These flies are going to pitch and move under an indicator, or if you cast and retrieve, they're going to jig and move up and down anyway. So we get that pin secured in there, and then we come up directly behind the bead and just take a little bit of time to build up a nice thread ramp to push that bead tight against the pin head. So it's going to take a little bit of tying thread. Go back and forth. You want to build up a nice gentle taper to the back of your bead. And that seems to have got it pushed up nicely there. Just move that back onto the shank, and at this point I coat the entire foundation with super glue. And if I was tying more than one of these balanced pheasant tails, I would build these chassis up and glue them and set them aside to dry, and then come back to them after they've all dried, and then they're good and secure. But we're tying a one off here, so we'll just keep soldiering on. So now, as the pheasant tail would imply, we're going to incorporate pheasant tail. So we're just going to take a little bit and form a short little pheasant tail. I got come up here. I'm going to trim about 6 to 8 fibers. Just pull them out 90 degrees from the stem. You can trim them or just strip them and pluck them off. That keeps the tips nice and even. Don't need too many. I'm just going to hold them up. You can tie them in a deliberately long, a couple of wraps. Look at your pheasant tail and go, that's a little long, and just if you support both fibers, you can just pull them to length a bit. That gathers them in as well. Still a little long, I think. That's a little better. It doesn't have to be much. And we're just going to secure those in place. And I'm going to take the butts and fold them back, because we're going to use these to form our body. And next we're going to tie in our ribbing material, which is going to be some ultra wire and small copper. You could also use gold if you wanted to. You could use hot orange to match the thread. You could do a whole pile of different combinations with your wire choice. So we're just going to take our wire, lay it along the near side of the shank, hold it in place, then wind our tying thread forward to secure. So just about right where this hook return starts, that's where the thread's going to hang, because that's roughly where our body's going to be. So now we're going to tie in the flashback. Okay, and if you're not careful, you can flashback the wrong side of your fly. You got to remember these balance flies actually hang upside down. So I'm just going to reposition my fly this way, and for my flashback, I'm just going to use some of this beautiful Mirage tinsel. Love this stuff. In medium, I'm going to lay that on top of the shank, just behind the eye of the hook, and then work the thread backwards, and as best I can navigate that tying thread right down to the base of the tail, and then we're just going to move our tying thread forward again in big open turns, cover some distance so it's hanging right behind the hook return, and then we're going to like to put a little bit of super glue on the shank, and then we're going to take our pheasant tail, reverse wrap it. We're going to crisscross our body and rib materials here for added durability. So we get our, careful of the hook point here, and we got that curly nature of our mylar getting in the way. And all we're going to do is wind this forward over the shank. And the beauty of having the super glue down is if I let go, and I'm just going to do it just to show you, it doesn't unravel too far because the glue is still going to grab it all. Went a couple of turns, but it didn't totally explode off the shank. I'm just going to get your mylar out of the way. I'm just using my non-tying hand just to keep everything honest and work this right up behind the hook return. Come over the top, 1 or 2 wraps, and you got that tied off. And then we'll come in with our scissors and just nip the excess away, being careful not to nip the tying thread, which is what I usually do when I'm demonstrating something. And we can add a few additional wraps in front and behind. And then we're going to take our mylar and just kind of pull that over the top. Have a bit of a look, make sure that's centered more or less down the back. A couple of wraps to secure it. You can kind of pull on it to tighten it down, wiggle it. That'll center it right on the top of the hook. Tie it down, fold it back over, trim. And now we're going to take our wire, just work it forward. And the reason, and I go away from myself the regular time to secure this down, and that's because when I come in to tie off my rib at the front here, if I counterwind it, the actual tie-off motion can actually push the wire open or unravel it a bit, but whereas this way, when I tighten down on it, it's just going to twist and tighten that wire ribbing even more. Just a couple more wraps to lock it off and break away the excess. And there's the flashback part. And then for the thorax, I'm going to take a couple of strands of peacock curl and just more or less align these by the tips. I'm going to trim the first 3/8 half of an inch off because they're so brittle. Put them up beside the hook, tie them in sort of right behind the eye return, go back slightly, and then come up. And then I like to tie this almost wet fly style. So I'm going to take a partridge feather in this case, and I want the individual fibers on there to be about as long as the shank. I don't mind them a little long. I think it adds a little movements just the way I kind of like them. So I stripped away all the flue and the fluff and the little aftershaft feather that's on there. So I've got just the nice fibers here. This is a little stiffer stemmed piece of partridge or feather. So I'm just going to rake my fingernail over the stem, and that sort of breaks the grain a little bit, makes it a little more manageable. I'm just going to take this, put that right on top. I'm going to tie that directly behind the bead and secure that stem down. And I've tied it in such a way that the convex or most prominently marked side of the feather faces forward. So when I wind this around the shank a couple of times to help suggest legs, it's going to flow back over. So we're just going to carry our tying thread down, make sure that stem's secure all the way, bring our tying thread right back up behind the bead, take our 2 strands of peacock herl, stroke them together, wind them a couple times, 2 or 3 times behind the hook eye, come around in front, and then tuck it back. So a bit of a diagonal tug, get that feather out of the way, a diagonal tug just to make sure that that peacock herl is trapped right behind. I'm going to go right up to the rear of the bead, tie this off, a couple of wraps behind, a couple in front, trim away our excess. You can see how I'm using my fingers to push that bobbin out of harm's way. A little bit of a stub or something sticking up there. Tie that out of the way, and now we're just going to take our hackle pliers. I'm going to take a half turn to make sure my feather is positioned properly with that convex side of the feather facing forward. And just pull and stroke these fibers back. 1 wrap, and the beauty of partridge is it's kind of a self-governing feather. You can usually barely get 1 or 2 wraps and you're done, which is perfect. We're going to zigzag through those fibers. It looks a little scary right now, but don't worry, we're going to tidy all that up. And then we're just going to take our thumb and forefinger, push everything back, and just build up a bit of a hot spot right in behind these fibers, right here. It's exactly what we want. And then I'm going to take, instead of super glue, I'm going to take some of the UV clear fly finish in the flow formula. This will help shine up this area, and do the same trick though. I'm going to coat the liberal coating of the flow on there, hold that back and just wind that in place. Whip finish. Trim. And then just come in with the UV light. Coat everything up, and that's all glued up. And then just to make my fibers flow a little better back down the fly, just give it a pinch sort of on top. Down like that. And you've got a nice finished, I'll just reposition the hook in the vise here. Makes it a little easier to pinch and flow those fibers back. That's how you train a soft hackle. Just give it a pinch, pheasant rub, guinea, whatever you'd like. And those fibers are going to flow back along. You got that nice little flashback, and those legs are going to move. And again, you can fish this under an indicator or cast and retrieved. And just taking your popular variation. Whenever you tie one of your favorite nymphs, you could do this with a hare's ear, anything like that. You're just not going to probably tie in the wing case, because again, the fly rides upside down. I'm just trying to create a wing case in and around the up eye, the return of the hook eye there is just too problematic, so I just skip it. I don't think the fish mind one bit one way or the other. So there's your simple, balanced pheasant tail. For more information on fly fishing, and Stillwater fly fishing in particular, please visit my website at flycraftangling.com. Here you will find fishing tips, fly patterns, articles, information regarding my seminars and schools, along with links to my blog and mine and Brian Chan's online Stillwater fly fishing shop. You can also visit our store directly at stillwaterflyfishingstore.com. In addition, you can also follow me through my social media channels, including Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching, and please take the time to watch my other tying videos as well.